Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we are dismantling a timeline that has governed human life for generations. We are looking at the new hard science that redefines what it means to be an adult. If you are 26, 28, or even 30 years old, and you still feel like you are improvising your way through life, waiting for that magical feeling of adulthood to finally click into place, I have good news for you. You are not failing. You are simply on schedule. Groundbreaking neuroscience published in late 2025 has shattered the old milestones we used to rely on. A landmark study from the University of Cambridge has confirmed what many millennials and General Zers have long suspected but could not prove biologically. Adulthood does not begin at 18. It does not begin at 21. Biologically, the human brain does not truly reach adulthood until age 32. This is not just a comforting headline for late bloomers. It is a fundamental shift in our understanding of human biology, and today we are going to dive deep into the mechanics of why your 20s feel like a chaotic dress rehearsal, and why your 30s bring a sudden stabilizing clarity. We are not extending adolescence out of laziness or economic fear. We are doing it because our brains are literally still under construction. Let us look at the new science of the epochs. For decades, neuroscientists operated under the assumption that brain development followed a steep curve in childhood and then plateaued in the early 20s. The prevailing wisdom was that the prefrontal cortex, which is essentially the CEO of the brain responsible for planning and impulse control, finished its job around age 25. That number, 25, has been cited in policy papers, insurance risk assessments, and rental car agreements for years. But new research, led by neuroscientists at the University of Cambridge and published in Nature Communications, has upended this completely. By analyzing MRI scans of nearly 4,000 individuals ranging from infancy all the way to age 90, researchers identified 5 distinct epochs of the human brain. The shocker in this data is the duration of the adolescent epoch. This is a period characterized by high plasticity, rapid rewiring, and emotional volatility. The data shows this epoch does not end at 19. It does not even end at 25. It stretches all the way to age 32. Dr. Alexa Mosley and her team found that the brain undergoes a massive topological shift in the early 30s. Before this point, the brain is focused on efficiency. It is ruthlessly pruning away weak connections to make neural highways faster. It is a time of violent internal change, where the brain is prioritizing flexibility and learning over stability. It is only around age 32 that the brain enters the adult epoch. This phase is defined by 3 specific changes. First is stabilization. The frantic rewiring slows down. The brain's architecture finally sets, leading to a plateau in personality traits and cognitive processing styles. Second is segregation. Different brain regions become more compartmentalized and specialized. Instead of the whole brain lighting up for simple tasks, specific experts or brain regions take over, saving energy and increasing focus. Third is peak white matter. The myelin sheaths, which act as the insulation around your neural wires, reach their maximum density, allowing for the fastest, most complex processing speed of your life. This discovery validates the experience of millions. If you felt like a different person at 30 than you were at 22, it is because, neurobiologically, you were. To truly understand this, we have to look under the hood at the 3 biological pillars of maturation that culminate in our 30s. The first pillar is synaptic pruning, or the great edit. Imagine your brain as a rose bush. In childhood and your early 20s, the bush grows wild. You have an abundance of synapses, or connections, that allow you to learn languages quickly, absorb culture, and adapt to new environments. But this abundance is inefficient. It is noisy. Throughout your 20s, your brain engages in synaptic pruning. It watches which connections you use, such as coding skills or emotional regulation, and which you do not, such as high school algebra or temper tantrums. It snips away the unused connections to make the remaining ones stronger. This process is surprisingly slow. By age 32, the great edit is largely complete. You have fewer connections, but the ones you have are superhighways. This is why you might find it harder to learn a new language at 35 than at 20, but you are infinitely better at complex decision-making and long-term strategy. The second pillar is myelination, or the insulation upgrade. If neurons are wires, myelin is the rubber insulation. Without it, signals leak and travel slowly. Myelination moves from the back of the brain, which controls vision and coordination, to the front, which controls judgment and reasoning. The prefrontal cortex is the very last stop. For years, we thought this finished at 25. We now know that the insulation process in the frontal lobes, specifically the areas governing emotional regulation and social consequences, continues thickening well into the 3rd decade. This biological reality explains why a 22-year-old might know a decision is risky, but do it anyway. While a 32-year-old feels a physical hesitation, the brakes are finally fully installed. The third pillar is the dopamine shift. The adolescent brain, now defined as ages 9 through 32, is hypersensitive to dopamine, the reward neurotransmitter. This makes highs feel higher and lows feel lower. It drives the hunger for novelty, status, and peer approval. As we cross the threshold of 32, the density of dopamine receptors in the brain's reward system changes. We become less driven by the immediate hit of novelty and more capable of appreciating slow rewards, like career stability, long-term relationships, and compounding investments. This isn't just you becoming boring. It is your neurochemistry switching from exploration mode to exploitation mode, which means using what you know to build a life. Now here is where it gets interesting. We have to talk about the Saturn return. It is a delicious irony that one of the most ridiculed concepts in astrology aligns almost perfectly with this new hard science. In astrological lore, Saturn takes approximately 29.5 years to orbit the Sun. The period between ages 28 and 30 is called the Saturn return, a time of cosmic reckoning where you are forced to grow up, face reality, and shed your youthful illusions. For decades, skeptics dismissed this as mystical statements. Yet, psychologists and neuroscientists are now describing the exact same phenomenon, just with different vocabulary. Astrology says Saturn demands you take responsibility and structure your life. Neuroscience says the prefrontal cortex completes its maturation, enabling executive function, long-term planning, and consequence analysis. The quarter-life crisis that hits so many between 25 and 30 is not a sign of weakness. It is the friction of the final stage of metamorphosis. The anxiety you feel is the psychological byproduct of your brain's architecture, shifting from a state of infinite possibility to defined reality. The Cambridge study notes that the age 32 transition coincides with a plateau in personality. This sounds stagnant, but it is actually a gift. In your 20s, your personality is somewhat fluid. You are a chameleon, adapting to friends, jobs, and partners, trying to figure out who you are by mirroring others. This is identity exploration. By the early 30s, two major psychological shifts occur that mirror the brain data. First is the social call. Research shows that the size of our social networks peaks around age 25 and then begins to shrink. By 30, we stop prioritizing the quantity of friends and start prioritizing the quality of emotional closeness. This aligns with the brain's move towards segregation and efficiency. We no longer have the neural energy to maintain superficial connections. We crave depth. The flaky friend you tolerated at 24 becomes intolerable at 32 because your brain is literally wired to reject inefficiency. The second shift is the rise of conscientiousness. The big five personality traits were once thought to be fixed. We now know that conscientiousness, the ability to be organized, dependable, and disciplined, and agreeableness, which involves warmth and empathy, typically see a sharp uptick in the 30s. Simultaneously, neuroticism or emotional instability tends to decline. Nature effectively programs us to be reliable community members, just as we are biologically prepared to take on the heavy lifting of raising families or leading tribes. Critics often argue that extended adolescence is a luxury of the modern world, claiming that our ancestors were married with 3 kids by 20, so they must have been adults. However, evolutionary biologists argue that human brain development has always been slow. We just forced people into adult roles prematurely in the past. Today, the economic landscape finally matches our biological timeline. Think about the career ladder. In a knowledge economy, it takes roughly a decade to gain the specialized skills required for high-level success, whether that is coding, law, medicine, or management. If you start at 22, you reach mastery around 32, exactly when your brain is most efficient at utilizing that mastery. Look at relationships. The median age of marriage has crept up to roughly 30 for men and 28 for women in many developed nations. Divorce rates for those who marry after 25 plunge significantly compared to those who marry earlier. Why is that? Because you are marrying with a fully formed brain. You are choosing a partner based on your adult architecture, not your adolescent dopamine loops. The failure to launch narrative is false. We are not failing to launch. We are fueling the rocket for a longer, more complex journey. So, if you are approaching 32, or have just passed it, you can leverage this science to live better. Here are a few practical ways to hack your new brain. First, for your career, stop grinding and start building. In your 20s, your brain was wired to say yes to everything. That was correct for that epoch. In your 30s, your brain is wired for specialization. Your cognitive advantage now lies in deep work and pattern recognition. Stop chasing every shiny object. Pick the 1 or 2 things you are truly good at and double down. Your myelin is ready to support expert-level performance, but only if you focus. Second, for mental health, forgive your 20s. Many people carry shame about the mistakes of their 20s, the bad debt, the toxic relationships, the wasted time. The science offers you absolution. You were operating with a brain that had a hyperactive accelerator and half-built brakes. You were not stupid. You were developmentally appropriate. Let the shame go. It is a vestige of a neural network that no longer exists. Third, for decision-making, finally trust your gut. In your early 20s, trusting your gut was risky because your gut was driven by impulse and dopamine. In your 30s, intuition is actually crystallized intelligence. It is your brain rapidly accessing a decade of stored patterns to give you an answer. If something feels off in a contract or a relationship, pay attention. Your prefrontal cortex is finally online, and it sees things your conscious mind might miss. The reclassification of adolescence as lasting until 32 is not an insult. It is a liberation. It suggests that the confusion of the 20s is not a bug, but a feature. It is a necessary period of high-stakes experimentation required to build a brain capable of navigating a complex world. If you are 25 and feel lost, relax. You are still in the lab. If you are 32 and feel a sudden, quiet weight settle onto your shoulders, welcome it. That is the feeling of your engine finally coming online. We are not getting older. We are just finally finishing the setup. The real ride starts now. Thanks for listening to G Fun Facts Online.